The Penguins scored what was maybe one of their best victories of the season to this point against the Los Angeles Kings. Hunter and I are going to break down that victory and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
Your Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at synonym for wet. Joined as always by my co-host, the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's Twitter account a follow at LO_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Plus, if you follow us on YouTube, make sure to hit the notification button. That way you'll be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Before we get started today, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hunter, the Penguins went into Los Angeles to take on one of the NHL's better teams, a team that is in a bitter fight in the Pacific Division amongst some of the best teams in the NHL. And there is really no two ways to put this. They went in and dismantled the Kings for 60 minutes, one of the Penguins' best efforts to this point this season. The game was never in doubt. They gave the Kings next to nothing, with the Kings' only tally coming on a 5-on-3 extended power play for the Kings, which we will get to as we break this game down. But overall, for the Penguins in the trend that they have been on to start the calendar year, this was a much needed, much required victory for them to get back into the playoff picture, because as we know, that's where they say they want to be. So a win like this against a team like the Kings, given the way you've started the calendar year, a lot to be happy about.
Yeah, coming into this game, when you looked at the standings, Pat, they were towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference and the league as a whole because of the way they've been playing for the last 7 to 10 days. Well, really the last couple of weeks, if we're being honest. They've really hit a little bit of a wall after going on that really nice stretch run in December, a little bit into January. But this was a much needed win. And I can't believe I'm saying this. I have no complaints from this game. This is an all positive episode. There is nothing the Penguins did in this game that I can complain about. They kicked the Kings' butts up and down the ice for the entire 60 minutes. That is their most complete effort in a very long time. I would say probably since the Washington game, the first one where they beat the Capitals in DC. This is right up there. If people want the blueprint for how the Penguins need to win games on a consistent basis, Pat, this is the game you want to look at. They forechecked aggressively. They generated, especially against the stingiest defensive team in the league. Usually when the Penguins play a team like this, they don't really generate that much. They get held to, 15, 16, 17 shots. That's kind of a little bit what I was expecting, considering how good the Kings have been playing. Nope. Penguins went in there and crushed LA with the way they generated, the way they were able to finish chances. And they didn't give any of it back in their own zone. The Penguins were also so good in their own end, played a simple, clean game, didn't give up too many odd man rushes. And when they were giving up a little bit of zone time, Alex Nedeljkovic was there to make the timely saves. That's now 2 really nice starts in a row from Nedeljkovic. And I know I said heading in this game, I would have given this to Blomqvist because I want to see him get an extended run. And I was also a bit nervous because the last time Ned had a really good start, remember the Edmonton game, Pat, he followed that up with a complete dud. So I was a bit nervous about that. Thankfully, it didn't happen. He was able to string together 2 good starts in a row. Now, see if he can maybe build on that later on in this road trip. I think they might go back to Blomqvist for this next game against Anaheim just because, A, the Ducks aren't that good, and B, you're kind of continuing this 1A, 1B situation. But Ned has definitely earned that third start somewhere in this road trip because they have 4 more games on it. That's 2 really nice starts, but they got contributions from all 4 lines. The penalty kill was even good. Power play was good once again. This was a complete team effort, a complete 60-minute effort. That is a blueprint that I want to see on a more consistent basis from this team. Outstanding win.
Absolutely. One of the more impressive things about this victory for the Penguins on Monday night was not just that they beat one of the better teams in the NHL as handily as they did. Winning at crypto.com arena has become a very big challenge for visitors. Up until last night, the Kings were 14-2-1 at crypto.com arena, and they were in the middle of a 9-game home winning streak. So up until this point, the Kings were virtually unbeatable in Los Angeles, and the Penguins completely threw that out the window with a great 60-minute effort. As for the goaltending, the way I'm kind of starting to see this trend emerge with what's happening with how they're using Nedeljkovic and now Blomqvist is I think the original plan is still in place when it comes to the goaltending, just with a different body in the net with Blomqvist, where they're both going to get equal opportunity for the next couple of weeks until one or the other decides to grab the net and hold on to it. Now, in a perfect world, they're both going to play extremely well, and you're going to have no choice but to do a little bit of a rotation. But I do think Mike Sullivan at this point is basically saying the plan is still there. We're going to rotate you guys every game or every other game. And until one of you decides to step up and say, I am the starting goalie, this is my net, you have to play me, we're going to keep that rotation going. And this was a great showing by Nedeljkovic because right until the Kings got the 5-on-3 power play and shortly after, they did start to mount a little bit of a push. It wasn't like they took over the game. The Penguins didn't go into a lull, but the Kings built some momentum on that 5-on-3 where they got the goal on the 2-man advantage. Then just a couple minutes later, Nedeljkovic makes a huge save. The Penguins turn it right around, go down the ice, and Cody Glass gets his second goal in 3 games, which let's touch on him for a quick second. What did we say about him yesterday? The only thing that was missing from his game up until this point was pretty much confidence and consistency. You could see that the talent was there, the potential was there. He just needed to find some confidence and consistency. And in the last week, he's really started to find that.
100%. Yeah, I think the biggest thing with him has been how inconsistent he's been. He'll have games where you notice him pretty good, though he doesn't get on the score sheet. Then he'll have other games where, A, he doesn't get on the score sheet, and B, you don't really notice him. Well, these last few games, you're starting to see him really heat up. 2 goals in his last 3 games. Really nice one in this game against the Kings. And he's forechecking well. He's getting below the dots. I'm really liking his overall game right now. He's also playing pretty solid in his own zone. I just really like what he's doing in the role that he's on, and I know they're going to make some trades at the deadline. I still want to see what he can do in that third line role, and have him be pretty consistent. So I'm really glad that Cody Glass continues to have a really solid last few games. Also, Pat, how about Kevin Hayes, buddy? I know we're going to get more into that in the second segment. That might have been his best performance of the year. Was that Kevin Hayes on the first goal, or was that Sidney Crosby with that edge work, by the way? The way that he was able to knife through so many Kings players on that goal, cuts to the net. Yeah, did he get a bit of a lucky bounce? He did. Let's be real here. He did. But the way that he was able to skate with the puck, the way that he was able to protect the puck there, as I said on Twitter, gorgeous stuff, and he continues to play awesome. And then he had that feed to Cody Glass for that goal. Buddy, he's been really good since coming back into the lineup. It still kind of makes me scoff at why he was even scratched for as long as he was.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of to build off of a little bit what I was saying about the goaltending. It's something that I like, but also don't like from Mike Sullivan when it comes to the bottom 6 this year is I have been advocating for you're going to carry a little bit of a heavier roster load just because of all the players that you signed and acquired in the offseason who aren't AHL players, but also aren't regular everyday NHL players. he is someone who is stuck to what I wanted them to do, where he's going to play 3, 4, 5, 6 games. Then he's going to sit for 2, 3, 4, and then come back into the lineup. But there hasn't really been, from Sullivan's perspective, a lot of consistency with that with everybody. Now, I still don't think that Hayes should be an every night 82 game player just because he's a little bit older. The style of hockey he plays is going to add a lot of miles to his body at that age. So if you were to put him in the lineup for 82, he's going to severely wear down by the end of it. But the usage they're getting out of him has been effective. When he's been in the lineup, he's been a very good player. And I want to kind of, before we dive deeper into Kevin Hayes in the second segment and a little bit more of the depth, I'll end it on this one. Another player who I noticed quite a bit last night, Philip Tomasino. On Evgeny Malkin's goal, just that is exactly the kind of thing that you're looking for out of players like him, out of players like Cody Glass, and a couple of the other guys that you're taking a chance on, where you're waiting for them to put it all together and you're seeing the flashes. In an unreal pass from him to Evgeny Malkin for the goal. So really excited to see what these guys bring. But
capped off a great shift there, by the way. They were skating circles around the Kings in their own zone, and Tomasino just let that puck fly. Gorgeous feed. Malkin makes no mistake with that. It's been really nice seeing Tomasino heat back up again as well, because for a little bit there too, Pat, he was just a little inconsistent, but he has heated back up in a big way. He's been awesome, though, since coming over. Dubas fully fleeced Barry Trotz in that deal. But yeah, we'll dive more into Kevin Hayes a little bit in the second segment, because I do want to push back a little bit on something you said about the 82 game stuff in the second segment. But again, we'll dive into that in a few minutes.
Like Hunter said, we are going to dive into that in our second segment, but a massive win for the Pittsburgh Penguins over the Los Angeles Kings, their third game of this 7-game, 15-day road trip. But when we come back, like we said, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the depth players on this roster. But before we do that, we've got to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win that first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app, it's easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the conference championship round, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, welcome back to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp, joined once again and always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. And you said you got some pushback for me, Hunter, and we're going to talk in this segment about some of the depth players, Kevin Hayes, Cody Glass, Philip Tomasino, et cetera, but I want to know right off the jump, what are you pushing back on?
Just that your claim that he shouldn't be an 82 game player. I get what you're saying to a degree, but when you look at this team top to bottom, I don't really think they have a choice, Pat. Like, I know Rickard Rakell was out of the lineup on Monday, and we hope that everything is okay with his family. By the way, that was the reason they said he was out, due to some family reasons back in Pittsburgh. Again, hope that everything is okay with him and his family right now. But even with him in the lineup, Rakell that is, I still think Kevin Hayes is one of the team's 12 best forwards. So you can figure that out however you want to. They're also going to make trades by the deadline that's coming up now. And today's January 21st. So about a month and a half, I think, at this point until the trade deadline. But even then, I still feel like with what I've been seeing when he's been in the lineup this year, almost a double-digit goals, really good playmaker. Heck, his skating, especially last night against the Kings, was great, even though he's still not that good of a skater. That's still the type of player that I want in the lineup over some, PK specialists who really don't do anything at 5-on-5 to drive offense. So I think with that, he should be in the lineup on an every night basis. I get what you're saying, though, just because of his age and everything else. But I still think he should be in the lineup on at least most nights, considering what he's doing right now.
I think I would go in agreement with you, but I would kind of piggyback more off of what you said right at the end, where maybe not all 82, but most. Like if you can have him play 65, 70 games, leave a few out there, let him recover, let him rest, because again, the skating isn't all that great. He does play a heavy game, which is something that most of the Penguins don't. And when you're the one guy doing it and shouldering, no pun intended, that load, you are basically doing it extra, and that is going to put extra miles on your body. And if this team does, in fact, pull itself back into the playoff race and find somehow a way to sneak in, you're going to need him in that first round, because I still maintain if this team can find a level of consistency and play the way they have, say, against your teams like Los Angeles and a couple others, do I think they can win a first round series? Now, obviously, I'm putting the cart so far ahead of the horse here, but I'm not going to say that, oh, they'll get in and surprise someone and win a round, but they can have a puncher's chance. And a way to have a puncher's chance is to have a guy in your depth, a depth option like Kevin Hayes, who can chip in when you need him to. But I digress.
I think we find the standings a little bit more before we start talking about
right.
The playoffs again.
But when you look at this from the big picture standpoint of where this team says they want to go, and if you're going to look ahead that way and act as if that's where they want to go, this is how I want to see that roster shaking out if and when you get to that point. But the other thing I wanted to say about last night was, yeah, you had your big guns get a couple goals. Obviously, Crosby with a classic Crosby tip. Evgeny Malkin makes no doubt on a great pass from Tomasino. But then your other goal scorers, we just talked about him. Kevin Hayes, he gets on the board in the first period with a great move on the power play. And then we talked about Cody Glass, who tremendous effort in feed from Kevin Hayes to make that goal happen, put a great effort in on that one. And then the guy who ends the scoring for the Penguins, Anthony Beauvillier, his 11th of the season, a guy who you started talking about the trade deadline, Hunter. His stock just keeps going up.
Pump that trade value, my friend, please. Just keep pumping it up. Try to get the Penguins back the best return they can. It's still, Pat, probably going to be like a mid-round pick. I don't think a player like this is going to drive too much value, but hey, he can pump it up as far as he wants. 11 goals, 15 points in 48 games. He's a fine depth contributor. It's been nice seeing him contribute this season, at least on a third or fourth line role. He's fine to replace Raquel until Raquel's ready to come back from whatever family issue he's dealing with. I don't want Beauvillier up there for a while, but he's at least a fine enough replacement until Raquel can come back, and then you can put Beauvillier on the third or fourth line, whatever you want. But he's at least been an okay depth contributor after having a really rough year last year, considering he played for, more than two teams. That was just a really rough year for him overall, Pat. But still, nice seeing him get that goal. And again, hey, he can pump that trade value up. Matt Grzelcyk gets a power play quarterback as well. He can keep pumping up that trade value. Marcus Pettersson, I felt like, had another great game once again. He can keep pumping up that trade value. All the players that they will probably deal at the deadline are pumping up their value right now. And that's all I can ask for from those guys.
And I agree with you to an extent on the Beauvillier thing. I'm not going to pretend like he is going to get some king's ransom at the deadline, but we do have to keep in mind double-digit goals on an expiring deal that is all of $1.25 million. I don't think he's going to get a prospect or a first-round pick or anything, but I think you could probably juice multiple picks, one or two out of it, just because when you have a guy in double digits and he's making that little money on an expiring deal, there is going to be a team who finds themselves third place in their division or first wild card spot that talks themselves into, man, we really got to juice that depth. We really got to get that depth scorer guy. And they're going to be willing to pay a little bit of a higher price. It's not going to be a premium. It's not going to be king's ransom. So make sure to expectations set here, people. You're not going to get a ton for him. But I do think if he keeps scoring at this rate with that contract, Dubas could maybe set off a little bit of a bidding war. One player who I wanted to bring up, since we've been so positive, and it's not going to be an overtly negative thing, but it just kind of continued the trend of the season from last night. Drew O'Connor. I don't know what has happened to this player this year. Obviously, wasn't terrible last night, but it just kind of continued the trend of I haven't really noticed him this year, and it's becoming an issue.
It stinks because he had a really good year last year, double-digit goals. I was hoping he was going to score 20 goals this year and potentially have the Penguins get a decent return for him at the deadline. Don't think you're going to be getting a pretty good return for him with the way that he's played. You might get a pick back, something like that, probably a mid-round pick for right now. But it's just been a rough year, man. I mean, he really hasn't had any consistency. He had a little bit to end 2024 heading into this year, but it just went right away again. I'm not really going to spend too much time talking about his performance just because of the way the Penguins as a whole played last night, but it is still cause for a little bit of concern heading in this next month and a half where he's also on an expiring deal. Again, Pat, I just don't think you're going to get a lot for him right now, even though he was playing at such a high level last year. I really thought this year he was going to break out even more, score 20 plus goals with the way he was playing. Just hasn't been able to find any consistency this year. But again, I don't want to spend too much time on it. I will say, loved how Sportsnet Pittsburgh ended the broadcast last night, playing Big City Nights by the Scorpions. Awesome song by an awesome band. Love rock music. That was great. Sorry, Pat. Had to say
The man is older than his age, says Hunter Hodes, that is. But yeah, I mean, to the Drew O'Connor point, like I said, it's more than anything, it's just been disappointing because he was so good throughout last year. It really looked like he was poised for a huge breakout this coming season, and it just has not materialized. We'll see what the organization's plans are for him. Obviously, we'll know if the deadline comes and goes and he remains a Penguin. They obviously, that'll tell us they still believe in him, but we will see what happens with Drew O'Connor. But that is going to do it for the second segment. When we come back, we didn't get a chance to do this yesterday because we had 2 games to recap and then we had a game to preview. There's a whole week of hockey ahead of us, so we'll get you set for the rest of the week when we come back. But before we do that, we've got to tell you about our last sponsor of the day, and that is SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Stanley Cup Final, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy, and as one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policy, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million with no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you might think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 per month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. SelectQuote, they shop, you save. All right, welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp, joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. And like I said, we didn't get a chance to do this yesterday because we had to recap 2 games and then get you ready for what became that massive 5-1 win over the LA Kings. But there is still a big week of hockey to be played for the Penguins, and they continue their tour of California on Thursday when they head to Anaheim to take on the Ducks. And then they finish off the week Saturday afternoon because they are going to be in Seattle. It'll be a 4:00 start for the Penguins and the Kraken. So this is really one of the better positions they could find themselves in right now as this road trip progresses. Obviously, they got a win over the Sabres. They lost to the Caps, but then they follow that up with a big win over the Kings. And now you've got 4 games ahead of you that are extremely winnable. Obviously, you've got the 2 this week. Anaheim Thursday night at 10 o'clock. Seattle Saturday afternoon at 4. And then you start next week on Monday against the San Jose Sharks at 10:30, another night owl game for all you sickos out there. And then they finish off the road trip next Wednesday in Utah at 9:30. So you look at these 4 games coming up, and the Penguins can take this from a good road trip to a great road trip.
Yeah, man. The good part about this road trip already is that their biggest games, or their biggest tests, are already behind them. You played Washington, you played LA. Those are the 2 best teams on this trip by far. You got to split in those 2 games, which in my opinion was probably their best case scenario. I mean, obviously the best case is winning both games, but I don't think they were ever going to do that considering how good both Washington and LA are. You also beat Buffalo, of course. So you're 2-1 so far, heading into the final 4 games against teams that are not very good this year. They're not even in a playoff spot this year. You play a Ducks team that they're struggling once again this year. They're going to sell at the deadline. How much they sell is TBD, but they're still going to sell off some assets. I think one of them might be John Gibson, but they're having another really rough year. After that, you play a Seattle team that just came into your barn and won a game that they probably didn't have much business winning because the Penguins outplayed them for most of that game. So I think the Penguins are going to have a pretty sour taste in their mouths from that. They also, of course, didn't get good goaltending in that game. So I think they're also going to want to go out there and really try to prove a point in Seattle. After that, you play a Sharks team that is also not very good. They're one of the worst teams in the league, but that's by design. Yes, they have Macklin Celebrini. They have a couple of young pieces around him and Will Smith, William Eklund. Gramlin is having a decent year, but they still don't have enough high-end talent to surround this core just yet. So they're still going to be bad for a little bit, but that's also another winnable game. Then you have Utah, who they kicked the Penguins' butts earlier this year where the Penguins were playing like utter garbage in the first month of the season. My dog is barking downstairs because he agrees with me. So the Penguins, they're going to have a sour taste in their mouth from that game as well. But again, Utah, they're still not very good. They're more fun than they are good. They have some fun pieces, some good players. They just haven't been able to put it all together this year. But it's also only their first year in Utah. But again, my point still stands, Pat. They have an opportunity to really bank some points here and try to get back into the race. Because again, you look at the standings right now, they are still further down in the conference than some of these other teams. But if you can finish off this road trip in style, beat teams that are either below you in the standings or right around you in the standings, potentially go, I'm just spitballing, 5-2, heck, even, 5-1-1 on this road trip, 6-1 on this road trip, obviously is the goal. You can maybe start cooking something up here as you head back home for the month of February. I know you'll have that long break in there because of the Four Nations face-off, but they have an opportunity here to really bank some points.
The game that I am circling on the calendar for the rest of this trip is Saturday in Seattle.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you. They have to have a sour taste in their mouth. They have to be ready to go out there and make a statement against a team that won a game they had no business winning on the Penguins ice. And at the very least, it appears for now that problem maybe hasn't been solved, but at the very least, the process has begun to solve that problem, which is goaltending, because we said it after that game. The Penguins played extremely well for the majority of it and got undone by poor goaltending. And this is the first time this season the Penguins have gotten 3 consecutive games of goaltending at .900 or better. And what do you know? They went 2-1, and the one in that 2-1 is against an extremely good team. And sometimes you just have to tip your cap to a team being better than you. So yeah, we're obviously going to have an expectation of beating Anaheim, an expectation of beating San Jose, because they are very bad teams. And if they drop those games, we're having a much different discussion. Yes. But the one that means the most, I think, right now is Saturday in Seattle, because you have to get your revenge for a game that you should have won.
And I'll even throw Utah in there as well, not just from a revenge point of view, but Utah embarrassed the Penguins to open the season. That's one of their worst losses of the season to date. I think the Penguins are going to go in there pissed off, because I think they're going to show, yep, that was not us. And we can show that we can play a hell of a lot better than what we showed you on our home ring. So I'm also going to be especially watching that game. But again, these are all big games. They're all against teams that are either below you in the standings or right with you. They're not in playoff spots. You have an opportunity here to really climb your way a little bit, at least, back into it, because, again, you look at the standings, none of those playoff spots in the wild card race, at least, none of those playoff spots are solidified. So a really strong road trip here could potentially go a long way. Well, but again, let's see. 2-1 to start. Let's see how the second half of it goes.
Huge opportunity for the Penguins to get back into the race. And obviously we will have full coverage of all of that, but that is going to do it for the Tuesday edition of Locked On Penguins. For Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will be back with a brand new episode for you on Wednesday.